All right. I think we are live. All right, we are live, I believe, and today's part 2 of my addiction story. If you've been following, I am a food addict. I've been a food addict, amongst other things, and I've spent all of my life pretty much being addicted to food. And in this live, I'm going to talk about how to identify, because a lot of people will be like, "Oh, I'm totally addicted to sugar," but if you said, "Well, are you a food addict?" they'd say no. I don't need to go to 12-step groups and that kind of stuff, which I did. I spent a lot of time, a lot of years doing that, recovering, healing, coaching people on that. About 9 years of my life, going to 12 steps and coaching through that. But, I knew it was always a problem. So today in this live, I'm going to talk about how to identify like addiction, addictive cycles, what the impacts are on us physically, emotionally, spiritually, those types of things. And then we're going to talk about ways to identify those things and kind of that impact and why that's important. So again, if you are watching and joining, let me know you're here. Give me a thumbs up. I'm going to be a little vulnerable with you guys, which I'm okay with. And I want to tell you my story, or a continuation of my story, and hopefully it helps some of you, because weight gain is hard, and actually a lot of times it comes from how our brain, eating food is normal, it's a healthy thing. We have to eat food to survive, but sometimes it impacts us in a way that actually makes us gain weight, of course, not just overeating, but the emotional components. And so that's something that in my process and program of what I've learned and taught people is you have to learn to master your mindset and how you think in order to lose weight permanently. And that's a lot of the work that we do, because it's not just about what you eat, it's how you think. Now you need both though. You got to think the right way and master your mindset, and you got to eat the right things and know what to do as far as that goes. Because, and I'll say this as a caveat before I start, just because I've overcome food addiction doesn't mean I don't eat food, right? Or treats or snacks. It's just all about thinking about it and making it so that I can heal from it and be in control. Okay, so let's break this down. Comment, let me know if you have questions, so I'm happy to answer them if I can. But let's break this down. So what it's like, and I'm going to talk about my story just really fast and what it's like to deal with a food addiction. And I'm going to break into some deep emotional things here probably, but this is going to help us. These are the kind of the symptoms. These are kind of the things that will help you identify if it's a problem, if it's actually a thing. Because again, there's kind of an addictive cycle, and there's kind of a spectrum almost, if you will, like where people are really far off the deep end and people who just like have a hard time saying no to cookies, right? Or they have a hard time putting it down, or they're addicted to Coke or whatever, Diet Coke, right? So what it's like. So one of the major things that I felt my entire life, and I spent pretty much my entire life doing things that I didn't want to do, or not doing things that I know I should. So one of the definitions of addiction is doing something even though you know it's bad for you. And so I spent my whole life eating food, even though I knew it was bad for me, right? And I want to dive into what that actually looks like and means on like a real life scenario. But another definition of addiction that you can kind of identify with is the inability to cope with emotions appropriately. Okay, so what that means is, do you use a substance like food or anything else? We could be talking about anything here. Do you use something to cope with your emotions? We call this stress eating in the United States and a lot of other places, but it's a real thing, and most people are doing it. Now, food makes you feel better, but are you coping with it? And are you in control? And are you doing it even though you know it's bad for you? So, like, here's some examples of things that I used to do. I would keep eating when I was full. I would eat and I'd feel full, and I would just keep eating almost until like my stomach hurt, right? Or until I was like bloated and just feeling crappy. I would have a hard time saying no to stuff. Like people like, hey, you want this? And even though I know like I've already eaten a ton for that day, or I've already had like 3 cookies, like I just keep eating them, right? And I can't stop. And I can't just throw something away. I have to eat it. I can't not finish all the food on my plate. I have to eat it. And there's subtle things. There's small things that you think is not a big deal, but it's actually the addictive process in our brain, knowing that like I've got a plate of food, or I bought this big old burrito and I have to finish the whole thing. Like for those of you who know what Cafe Rio is, it's a kind of Utah, Western Arizona, Idaho restaurant. They make these like massive salads and burritos, and I would have to finish the entire thing. Now some people think, well, that's nothing. I do that every time. But like I knew I was full and I just kept eating, right? But same thing like with treats. I knew I already had like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of them, and I keep doing it, right? And oftentimes I'd actually hide it from other people, like my roommates or parents or wife or something. Like I used to, I think in my last video I said I used to hide candy wrappers in the couch cushions because I knew I shouldn't eat it, or I'd sneak the candy and then I'd have to hide it. And every kid probably does that, but that's kind of where it started for me. And then I'd be in my apartment in college. My roommates were gone, and I'm like pounding like 5 bowls of cereal, even though I just ate lunch like an hour ago, right? And so it was affecting me like in those ways. And so those are some of the things that you can kind of start identifying, like, am I doing those things, right? And having a food addiction is really impactful. Like it impacts every area. It's not just your physical health. And if you don't know this yet, some of you watching this are gonna be like, yeah, I know. It's impacting me socially, emotionally, spiritually, physically. And obviously the physical impacts, there's an immediate, you feel sick, there's indigestion, there's all sorts of stuff of like when you just eat too much or you binge, or you even the other way, like you can be addicted to not eating and have that kind of disordered eating that way. And then obviously there's the long-term effects physically, weight gain, and messes with your hormones, messes with your brain. You can't cope and deal with emotions appropriately, so that affects the emotional side and depression and anxiety. There's all sorts of physical impacts that start happening. And then of course the blood pressure and all that stuff from being overweight and having so much inflammation and stuff in the body. But socially, for me, I find I was isolating. I didn't want to go do things anymore. I felt uncomfortable like doing certain things, especially if it meant taking my shirt off, like going to the lake or the pool or something like that, to the beach. I was always like a little chubbier and just felt a little uncomfortable. I compared myself a lot to other people, like my friends or people. I'd be like, oh, like whatever, say all sorts of negative things in my mind, and felt again kind of this isolation. Like I didn't really feel comfortable with who I was. Didn't want to do things because of that, and that affects me emotionally. I was depressed. I was anxious. I felt uncomfortable in my skin. I felt undisciplined, like I didn't have any self-control, which made me feel undeserving, and felt unloved, and I wasn't able to deserve to achieve my goals and to have good things in my life because I constantly was going against what I thought I should be doing, constantly. And it drains you. It spiritually kills you. It emotionally kills you. It's depressing. And I know that firsthand experience. I know a lot of people are probably watching this going, yeah, I get it. Like you're overweight, but you're also drained emotionally. You're drained physically. You're drained spiritually. Like it's tiring to try to overcome it and not be able to say no. And you're always giving in. You're feeling like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. You did it anyway. And then you can't reach your health goals and lose the weight. Like me, I was running 8 miles a day, 6 to 10, averaging about 8, going to the gym, doing all of this stuff during college, but yet was still overweight. Right? Still felt like crap. So though it can have some serious major impact, obviously immediately on your emotional and physical and spiritual well-being, but it can also have some impact long-term on a lot of other things like your relationships, your ability to have healthy relationships, not just with maybe a spouse or kids, but with your own self, with your body, with food, and all those types of things. So really, really important stuff. But anyway, most of that was just sharing my story, and kind of the impact that I felt. Maybe you can relate with that. If you have, I feel for you and with you, because it's a battle. And here are some, I want to go through just maybe I have 9 different ways you can kind of identify. There's more than this, but I'll just kind of talk about 9 things you can kind of go through, or 8 things you can go through to kind of say, do I do this? Maybe I've got some addictive cycles going on in the brain. And maybe in another live, I'll go through what that addictive cycle is and how to actually break it, because that's the key, right? This is just to be like, okay, yeah, I need some help maybe, or I need to start working on this myself. But the first key is awareness, of course, and this is how you become aware. So here's some 8 things, or 9 things, we make it in 8 or 9 different things that you can do to identify, do I have an addictive cycle happening in my brain? So the first thing is, and we already mentioned this, is that you eat food, or you could substitute food for anything: gambling, buying stuff, shopping, alcohol, pornography, like anything, right? But we're talking about food here. So you eat food even though you know it's bad for you. And most people know sugar is bad for them, but they eat it anyway. That's a note. Like you should note that sugar is addictive, and you probably, again, we don't want to eat it. And that doesn't mean I don't eat treats. Again, remember that. There's a way you can do it that doesn't cause the same impact. But a lot of the stuff we talk about, right? You do it even though you know it's bad. You're overweight and you know you should give it up, but you don't. You can't. You keep eating when you know you shouldn't. You all these things, like you eat more than you know you should. You don't throw things away even though you're done, right? Those types of things. Another one is that you get cravings even though you're full. So like you eat dinner and you're full, and what do you want right after? Something sweet, something crunchy, something salty, right? Now, sugar is addictive, yes, but all food, and especially processed food, even more so, because of the fats and the sugars and the salts and the chemicals they use. So again, even though you're full, you crave something still. That's actually a sign of insulin resistance as well, just so you know. The other thing, the next one is, again, eating more than you intended. Like say, oh, I'm going to have one cookie and I had 3, or I'm going to have this plate, but you end up getting a bunch more, right? So you're just eating more than you wanted to or you intended to. Again, eating until you're super full, which is different than the stuff we've talked about. Getting cravings even though you are full is different than eating until you're excessively stuffed, right? And so if you're just constantly overeating and overeating more than you wanted, and you're just feeling sick almost to the point your stomach hurts, or even just more than you wanted, you don't have to get to the point where you're going to throw up, but just more than you wanted to, then that's a sign that there's an addictive process happening in the brain. Feeling guilty afterward, but again doing it afterwards, not that long. So this is a very much cycle that I lived in my whole life, where I spent most of my time saying, I don't want to do that, or I'm going to stop doing that. And then I did it anyway, and I felt guilty. And because I felt guilty, that might motivate me to stop. A lot of times I felt guilty, so I just kept going. And in the dieting world, we look at this as like, well, I feel guilty, I might as well start next week. And we chalk it up to that, but it actually, a lot of times, it's the addictive cycle. It's the character traits of someone who's struggling with the addictive cycle in the brain. So you feel guilty, but you do it again afterwards. Sometimes immediately, and sometimes it's like, okay, I'm going to change, and you like know until you do it, and you're really good, you shouldn't do it anymore, or you want to eat healthy, and then all of a sudden, like, the weekend rolls around, you're doing it again, right? Or whatever. So that guilt, motivation to change, fall back in, feel guilty, that cycle that happens, that's a really common thing in the addictive cycle. Repeated failures at setting rules for yourself. So you set a rule, you say, I'm not going to eat this, or I'm going to only have one treat, or I'm going to, count my calories as people do. This is why I think calories are stupid, because some foods are more addictive. Anyway, well, that's a whole different topic. But like, you set these rules for yourself, and then you keep breaking them. I call that breaking contracts. So I did that my whole life. I set a rule and said, I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to make sure I exercise every day, or I'm going to not eat these foods, or I'm going to eat these foods only, or whatever rules you set for yourself, but you keep failing at those things. Or you don't even set them in general. I mentioned earlier what I did is hiding from others, hiding your food. You got your own stash of candy that you hide. You got your Diet Coke stashed away that no one else can have. You don't do it around other people. Maybe you feel weird or uncomfortable or guilty. You're just hiding it. You're sneaking it. You're doing it in the car. Like, I used to stop at gas stations and buy candy bars, and I'd make an excuse for whatever reason. Or I'd go purposely past like the candy aisle so I could grab a candy bar or whatever. Twix was my candy. Well, actually, any candy. Anyone says, "What's your favorite candy bar?" All. But hiding that from others, and then I'd sneak it and hurry and eat it before people, like I got home or something like that. That's all indicators that there's an addictive cycle happening. And then the last one is unable to quit despite having physical problems. So you're gaining weight. Maybe you got joint pain, maybe you got digestive issues, maybe you got sleep problems, maybe you have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, maybe you have insulin resistance, autoimmune problems. Doesn't matter, any physical symptom that's going on, and yet you keep doing it, and you shouldn't. It's impacting, but you can't stop. So anyway, those are the things that you can start thinking through that will help. And let me review them again really fast for you, just in case you can go back and watch this. But you eat food even though you know it's bad for you. You get cravings even though you're full. You eat more than you intended to eat. You eat until you feel excessively stuffed, and you feel guilty afterwards, but you do it again. You repeat, failures at setting rules and sticking to your rules. or you have repeated failures. You hide eating from others, and then you're unable to stop eating. And this also goes into soda. I'm saying eating, but I mean drinking as well. Diet or non-diet soda or anything, juice, doesn't matter. You're unable to quit doing those things, even though you have physical problems. So anyway, hopefully that helps you guys start to identify. Now, you may be like, oh, I'm not addicted, even though I do some of those things. But you may just say, well, I'm falling into a dieting mentality, or I just have low self-control, low willpower, low confidence, whatever. But I'm telling you right now that this is a real process in the brain. And I'll cover that. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. We'll cover the actual addictive process in the brain and what it looks like. You can check out my first one, scroll on my feed, or go to the YouTube. I'll include the link to all these videos on YouTube as well. So you can see each video that I do. So you can keep tabs on where we're at. But don't be fooled. Don't be naive like I was and go most of my life not thinking I had an addictive cycle happening, or I was addicted. I actually don't label myself as an addict, just so you know. I think that's one of the ways you think the right way. I'm someone who struggles with an addiction. I'm a powerful, in control person that struggles with an addiction. That's what I identify myself as someone who is loved and is cared about and has great discipline and great goals, but I struggled with an addiction. Okay, so I don't want to label myself and identify that I'm an addict, even though I kind of say that to get people's attention, but that's part of the thinking process. But you have to understand that this is a true cycle. It's actually a natural cycle in the brain, but it can be hijacked, if you will, to where your brain literally loses its ability to put the brake pads on. There's different parts of your brain at work, and your brake pedals in your brain essentially should say, whoa, 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 you've already had one or two of those. You shouldn't have any more. Or, you know, that's bad for you. You shouldn't do it. Or you're feeling guilty. Don't do it again. Or you don't need to hide, like, if you should hide this from others, you probably shouldn't do it, right? Like, your brain should be able to put that brake pad on to make it so that you don't do that. But if you're doing those things, that means the brake pads of your brain have started to wear out. They're starting to not work the way they should. And so that's an addictive cycle. It means the brain structures, the neural pathways in the brain are not working the way that they're intended to. They're not working healthily. If you cope with emotions through food, if you use something to, cope with the emotions, or, deal with those appropriately, then, it's an addictive cycle. So be aware and don't be ashamed. Say, yeah, absolutely. Like most of America, I would say, under these categories and these symptoms, and this is actually what they're finding, most people that eat processed food are addicted to it. It's a real thing. So anyway, I'm going to end this live here with that. I want you to know that it's possible to change. I've done it. I still eat treats. I still eat snacks. I've lost 50 pounds and I've kept it off for 7 years now. I'm not an addict. I don't have the addictive cycle. I'm not perfect, of course. I still tend to love treats. I have a sweet tooth totally, but I'm in control. So I want to leave that with you, that it's possible. And stay tuned in. Probably tomorrow or this week, we'll be making some more of these videos that we'll be putting out in our lives and on YouTube. And I'll be talking about the addictive cycle and how it actually works in the brain. And then we'll also talk about how to break that cycle, how to actually change and heal from that. I'm going to give you guys in future videos how to, like, steps you can take, processes, exercises you can do, not like physical exercise, but like worksheet type stuff that you can do to actually start breaking through, things you can do on a daily basis to actually break through and be in control. So anyway, hopefully this helps. Let me know if you have any questions, comments. If you need help, as always, this is one of the things I work on in my program. I help people overcome this. I help them create the life they want, the identity they want, and break through their limiting beliefs, their limiting behaviors, reboot their metabolism so they never have to struggle with weight again. And so if you need some help with that, let me know. Happy to help, and I'll see you guys later.